Hi, I'm Ava, 38 years old. Lately, life has been quite challenging for me. The past few months have been a journey of rediscovering important lessons, especially when it comes to trust and resilience. A significant part of my struggles stemmed from my ex-husband, Ethan. However, during this difficult time, a kind soul appeared and helped me avoid even more heartache. Let me tell you about the people who have had a significant impact on my life. First, there's my younger sister, Chloe. She's 5 years younger and has always been the more attractive one. Growing up, we didn't have the best relationship. I was the bookworm, while she was the popular one, and for some reason, she often picked on me. It felt like jealousy, but I never understood why. Our mom, Eleanor, tried to mediate, but nothing seemed to work. After I left for college, we barely kept in touch. It wasn't out of anger, but we just grew apart. Once I graduated and Chloe entered her teenage years, we started talking a bit more, though we never really became close. Our relationship improved in some ways, but we still didn't bond like most sisters do. I eventually accepted that this was as good as it was going to get, and I was okay with that. Then, there's Ethan, my ex-husband. We met at work and instantly connected. He was charming, sweet, and we dated for about 4 years before we got married. After our wedding, we worked hard and managed to buy our first home. At that time, I was earning more, so the mortgage and deed were in my name. It seemed like everything was going perfectly. 3 years into our marriage, Ethan brought up the topic of starting a family. "Honey, there's something I've been thinking about," he said one evening. "I need you to hear me out and keep an open mind." "Okay, what is it?" I asked. "Well," he continued, "we've been together for a while now, and I've been wondering if we should start thinking about having a family. What do you think?" I hesitated. Ethan knew I wasn't entirely on board with the idea of having children. "Ethan, you know I'm not really sure about that," I replied gently. "I know," he said, "but we're financially stable now. It wouldn't be too hard. And just imagine how cute little versions of us would be running around the house. Doesn't that sound nice?" I smiled at the thought, but I remained cautious. "Yeah, but kids are a lot of work. They're a huge responsibility." "We're 3 of the most hardworking and responsible people we know, right?" he teased, trying to convince me. "Just think about it, okay? I promise, they help with everything." Despite my doubts, I eventually gave in. Ethan kept bringing it up, and over time, I started to warm up to the idea. Soon enough, we welcomed our first child, Liam. 4 years later, we had Sophia. At first, Ethan was very supportive. He helped out with the kids, and I thought everything was going well. But things changed quickly. Ethan slowly stopped helping around the house. All the responsibilities fell on me, taking care of the children, the house, and everything in between. I found myself doing it all. After our son was born, Ethan got a promotion and started earning more than me. One day he came to me and suggested that I should stop working. "I'm making enough now," he told me. "Why don't you focus on the kids in the house? You don't need to work anymore." I tried to resist at first, knowing how important my career was to me, but Ethan was persistent. He kept saying it made sense for our family, and eventually, I gave in to his wishes once again. I quit my job, thinking it would make things easier for everyone, but I had no idea how much worse things were going to get. I decided I quit my job. It wasn't worth the argument anymore, so I accepted my new role as a stay-at-home mom. To keep myself from getting bored, I picked up a new hobby: hosting dinner parties. It gave me something to look forward to, and it was nice to have my family around. I often invited Eleanor and Chloe, who both lived nearby, and whenever my mother-in-law Beatrice was in town, she would join us as well. At first, this new life felt strange, but over time, I started to get comfortable with it. I had more time to spend with my kids, and I got to see my family often, which brought me some happiness. Ethan and I were doing okay, at least I thought so. However, there had been some strain in our relationship. After giving birth to our second child, I went through a traumatic experience where I almost lost my life. It was a terrifying time for me, and it definitely affected our marriage, but I tried to push past it, telling myself everything would be fine eventually. I didn't think anything else was seriously wrong between us, but how wrong I was. One afternoon, I was cleaning our bedroom when I stumbled upon something that stopped me in my tracks. A pair of panties that didn't belong to me. They were lying in a corner, and my heart sank the moment I saw them. My mind started racing. How could this be? Were they someone else's? Was I not enough for Ethan? I had been feeling distant from him lately, but I had just had a baby. It hadn't even been a full year since I gave birth, and I was still recovering both physically and emotionally. I had been going to therapy to help deal with my postpartum trauma, making slow progress, but it seemed like it wasn't enough because now I was faced with the reality that my husband might be cheating on me. Once the initial shock wore off, anger took over. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had to know who he was cheating with and why. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and sent Ethan a picture of the underwear. I texted him asking, "Whose are these?" But I didn't stop there. I needed more answers, so I opened his laptop and logged into his social media accounts. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate. I scrolled through his chats, hoping to find something, but at first, there was nothing suspicious. No unfamiliar women, no secret conversations that stood out. This only confused me more. I went through every contact, every message, trying to find some sort of clue. As I scrolled, I noticed that my sister's name popped up in a lot of the conversations. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, why would I be suspicious of my sister talking to my husband? But something in me pushed to check their chat history anyway. What I found made me feel sick to my stomach. Their chats were filled with pictures and videos of them in bed together. There were messages where they talked about how much they loved each other and even plans for Ethan to leave me. I was horrified. My own sister, Chloe, the one I had known my entire life, had been sleeping with my husband behind my back. I couldn't believe it. I felt betrayed on a level I didn't even think was possible. My relationship with my sister had always been complicated, but I never imagined she would do something like this. First, I ran to the bathroom and threw up because the disgust was overwhelming. Then, I tried calling Ethan, but he didn't pick up. My mind was racing with so many questions and I needed answers, so I did the only thing I could think of. I called my sister, Chloe. She responded casually as if nothing was amiss. "Hey, what's up?" she said. I could barely hold back my anger. What's up me? Seriously, what the hell is going on with you?" Chloe sounded genuinely confused, as if she had no idea what I was referring to. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I found a pair of your panties in my bedroom," I snapped. "Have you been sleeping with Ethan?" There was a brief silence before she replied, almost indifferently. "Yeah, for a while now." My heart tightened in fury. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you do this to me?" Chloe sighed, clearly irritated by my reaction. "I don't know, Ava. It just happened." "You actually thought it was okay to sleep with my husband?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're my sister. How could you do this to me?" "I thought I was helping you out," she answered, as if it was no big deal. Helping me out by sleeping with my husband? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Chloe had always been self-centered, but this was beyond anything I ever imagined. The casualness in her tone made it even worse. "Look, Ava, you've been kind of boring lately. I figured I'd step in since you clearly weren't making Ethan happy." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe she was trying to justify her betrayal as if she was doing me a favor. In that moment, I realized how blind I had been to the toxicity in both my marriage and my relationship with Chloe. The people I trusted most had shattered my life, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You kept Ethan busy so I could focus on the kids? Are you serious?" I screamed into the phone. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." Chloe sighed again, her tone flat. "Look, we didn't mean for it to go this far, okay? I only did it because he kept hitting on me, and he's a nice guy." My heart sank even further. But he's my husband, Chloe. Why would you help tear our family apart like this? She didn't seem to care. I just want what's best for Ethan. If I'm what's best for him, then so be it. I was shocked. You're disgusting, I spat before hanging up. I couldn't believe her audacity. My own sister, who should have been supporting me, had betrayed me in the worst way. I lay in bed, numb, tears streaming down my face. I never imagined my life would come to this. Everything felt broken. Eventually, Sophia woke up crying, pulling me out of my haze. I wiped my tears and took care of her, trying to push the pain away. I couldn't let my kids see what was happening. They didn't need to carry this burden. As I went through the motions of the day, picking up Liam from school, making dinner, and trying to smile when they asked where their dad was, I lied and told them he was working late. Inside, I was falling apart. As the hours passed, my anger turned into worry. It was almost 10 p.m., and Ethan still hadn't come home. I tried calling him multiple times, but he didn't answer. I even tried calling Chloe to see if he was with her, but she didn't pick up either. Exhausted and emotionally drained, I finally went to bed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I'd wake up and find that this had all been a terrible nightmare. But when I woke up the next morning, the feeling of dread only deepened. Something was wrong, and I could feel it. I looked around the bedroom and noticed that Ethan's things were missing. I rushed to check the cupboards, the drawers, and anywhere he might have kept his stuff. Most of it was gone. He had left while I was asleep, without a word, without a note, without a goodbye. I stood there in disbelief. Ethan had just left. He didn't even try to talk things through or explain himself. He had simply packed up and walked out of our lives. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, but the only thing I could think about was my children. They needed me, and that had to come first. So I did what any mom would do. I pushed down the pain, got my kids ready for the day, dropped Liam off at school, and then drove to Eleanor's house with Sophia. When I got there, Eleanor could tell something was wrong. I was distant, barely speaking, my mind trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. I hadn't even had the courage to tell her about Ethan and Chloe yet. All I could think about was how I was going to raise 3 kids on my own. The weight of it all was too much. Finally, Eleanor couldn't take my silence anymore. She looked at me, concerned. "Okay, enough," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "What's going on?" "Something's clearly bothering you." I hesitated. How could I even begin to explain? "I don't know how to say this," I started, my voice trembling. "Just start from the beginning," she urged. "What happened?" I took a deep breath and blurted it out. "I found out Ethan has been cheating on me." Eleanor's face fell in shock. "What? How do you know?" "I found another woman's underwear in our bedroom. When I asked Ethan about it, he didn't answer, and then he left." Her eyes widened. "He left? What do you mean he left?" "When I woke up this morning, all his things were gone. He packed up and left during the night. I didn't even realize when he came back." Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. "Oh my God, my poor girl. I'm so sorry this happened." I could feel the tears welling up again. "Yeah," I whispered. "It gets worse." Eleanor's expression changed to one of deep concern. "Oh no. What happened?" "Do you know who he cheated on you with?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know who it was. I went through his things, and I found out." Eleanor looked at me, her gaze intense as she searched my eyes. "Who was it?" she asked softly. I could barely choke out the words. "It was Chloe." A long, heavy silence followed. Eleanor's face drained of color as she stared at me in disbelief. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" I repeated the words, my voice breaking under the weight of the pain and betrayal. "My own sister. Ethan has been cheating on me with my own sister." Eleanor's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide in shock. Neither of us could believe the nightmare that was unfolding. I called Chloe to confront her about everything, I continued, and to my shock, she was completely casual about it. She told me they were in love, and that she thought she was the best thing for Ethan, so she planned to stay with him. I could hardly process what I was hearing. My own sister had betrayed me, and she seemed completely indifferent. "Oh my God," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What has she done? How am I supposed to survive this?" The weight of it all crushed me. I had 3 kids to raise, no job, and now no husband. Eleanor placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice gentle. "Look, why don't we get some rest for now? We'll figure this out together. I'm here to help you, okay?" I nodded, feeling a small sense of relief from her support. "Yeah, okay. Thanks, Eleanor." By the time I finished telling Eleanor everything, I felt numb. It was strange, but somehow talking about it wasn't as difficult as I had imagined. Maybe I had already started shutting down emotionally. That night, I managed to sleep while Eleanor took care of Sophia. I felt completely drained, like my body couldn't take any more. When I woke up, I heard Sophia crying and Eleanor's voice, loud and angry. I rushed out of bed and found her on the phone, her face furious. She hung up as soon as she saw me, and her expression softened. "I'm sorry for the noise," she said, "but don't worry about it." I didn't need any explanation. I knew she had been giving Chloe a piece of her mind. Over the next few days, Eleanor stayed with us, and it helped to have someone by my side. Chloe kept calling her mom, but she asked me to block Chloe's number. It was comforting to have someone who truly understood what I was feeling, especially when I felt so alone. Soon, I learned from mutual friends that Ethan and Chloe had gotten married. They reached out to me, confused and concerned, and I had to explain the whole painful situation. It was humiliating, but they were supportive. Many of them blocked Ethan and Chloe, cutting ties with them for good. I couldn't believe they had married the day after Ethan left me. It stung deeply, but I realized I shouldn't have expected anything different from them. When I told Eleanor, she was furious. Normally calm and composed, seeing her this angry was surprising, but her support meant everything to me. She didn't have to help me financially, but she did. She even helped me land job interviews, knowing how much I wanted to contribute now that Ethan was out of the picture. Taking care of the kids was manageable, but every time they asked about their dad, I had to fight back the tears. It was tough, but we were managing, slowly but surely. About a week later, I received a letter from Ethan. I didn't want anything to do with it. In my mind, a week was far too long for him to try and make things right, especially after abandoning his family. I figured it was some kind of apology, but I didn't care anymore. I was done. Without thinking twice, I burned the letter. Afterward, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of curiosity about what it said. Sometimes I wondered if I should have read it before destroying it, but then I reminded myself that nothing Ethan could say would change how I felt about him or what he had done to me and our kids. The next day, Eleanor and I decided to take the kids to the local fair. It was a much-needed distraction, and we had a blast. It felt so good to laugh and enjoy myself after everything that had happened. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to have fun. That night, after we got the kids to bed, Eleanor and I relaxed with a bottle of wine. I opened up to her about the letter. "So, something came in the mail for me yesterday," I said, swirling my wine glass. "Oh, what was it?" Eleanor asked. "A letter from Ethan," I replied. Eleanor looked at me in surprise. "What? What did it say?" "I don't know," I admitted. She furrowed her brow. "What do you mean you didn't open it?" I didn't want to deal with anything he had to say, I said, so I burned it." "You burned it?" Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. "What if they were divorce papers or something important?" I shook my head. "The envelope didn't look official or legal. I'm sure it wasn't that." Eleanor sighed. "Well, if you're sure, but what do you think was in it?" I thought for a moment, but I honestly had no idea. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was nothing, but whatever it was, I knew it couldn't change the way I felt about Ethan or what he had done to me and our family. I was moving forward with or without answers. I don't know, I said, thinking about the letter I burned. Maybe it was a weak apology or a request for his stuff back. I wouldn't be surprised if that's all it was. Eleanor looked at me with concern. How are you feeling about all of this now? I sighed. Today was actually a good day, but it's tough, especially when the kids keep asking where their dad is. What do I even tell them? It's slowly getting better, but only a little. As long as it's improving, even just a little, Eleanor said reassuringly. And you know I'm always here for you. I want you to know something. I'm cutting ties with your sister. Everything I have, it'll go to you and the kids. I was touched by her words. Eleanor, that means so much to me. But are you sure? Chloe is still your daughter too. She nodded firmly. I know you and Chloe had your differences growing up, but what she did is unforgivable. I raised both of you better than this, and clearly, Chloe didn't care. She's no longer my daughter after what she's done. I was speechless. A part of me understood Eleanor's decision, but I also knew how painful it must have been for her to make. I could never imagine cutting off one of my own children, no matter what they did. But hearing her say it made me even more grateful for her unwavering support. I knew it couldn't have been easy for her, and yet she stood by me. Another 5 days passed in relative peace, but one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It felt odd since I wasn't expecting anyone, except for Eleanor, who was at work. No one ever visited me anymore. A wave of unease washed over me as I approached the door cautiously. When I opened it just a crack, I was surprised to see 3 men dressed in black suits standing on the other side. Who are you? I asked, my voice shaky. The men introduced themselves as lawyers, explaining that they had something for me. One of them handed me a letter, and then, to my shock, a check. As I looked at the check, my jaw nearly hit the floor. It was made out to me for $980,000. There must be some mistake, I stammered, utterly stunned by the amount. There's no mistake, one of the men said gently. Please read the letter. With shaky hands, I opened the letter. As I read the first line, "Thank you for saving me," I realized the money was from my mother-in-law, Beatrice. She explained in the letter that she had tried visiting us 5 days ago, but found no one at home. When she called Ethan, he made excuses about not being able to get into the house. Beatrice became suspicious and pressed him for the truth. Eventually, Ethan confessed everything about the affair, about leaving us. Beatrice was disgusted by his behavior. She wrote that she was deeply sorry for everything I had gone through and was grateful that I had not trusted her son with her assets. That's why she had decided to leave all her inheritance to me and her grandchildren. The check I held was part of that inheritance. Tears filled my eyes as I continued reading. The lawyers then explained that Beatrice had been terminally ill, and she had passed away just the day before. She had instructed them to make sure I received the money immediately after her death, so I could take care of myself and the kids. Her letter ended with a heartfelt thank you for preventing her from making a mistake and trusting Ethan with her finances. I was overwhelmed by Beatrice's kindness. Despite everything, she had always been a woman of integrity, someone who stood up for what was right, even when it meant going against her own son. Ethan had always been intimidated by her strength and independence, but I had admired her for those very qualities. As the reality of her passing sunk in, I couldn't help but cry. Beatrice had been remarkable, and even in her final days, she had thought about me and my kids. She had wanted to protect us, and in doing so, she left behind a legacy of generosity and care. It was hard to believe that someone who had no obligation to me anymore would go to such lengths to ensure we were okay. I wiped away my tears and thanked the lawyers for delivering the letter and check. They expressed their condolences and left quietly. As I stood there holding the check, I couldn't help but feel both sadness and gratitude. Beatrice's last act of kindness had given me a lifeline, something to hold on to as I rebuilt my life without Ethan. Later that night, I sat down with Eleanor and shared everything with her. "Eleanor," I said softly, "you won't believe this, but Beatrice left me and the kids her entire inheritance." Eleanor looked at me, stunned. "What? Why would she do that?" "She knew what Ethan did," I explained, feeling the weight of it all again. "She was disgusted by him, and she didn't want him to have anything, so she gave it all to us." Eleanor leaned back, shaking her head in disbelief. "Beatrice was a strong woman. It doesn't surprise me that she'd do the right thing in the end. You and the kids truly deserve this after everything you've been through." I smiled, though my tears were still falling. She was one of the good ones. I just wish I could have thanked her in person. "She knew," Eleanor said quietly. "In her own way, she knew how much it would mean to you." We spent the rest of the evening reminiscing about Beatrice and how she had always carried a quiet strength that people often underestimated. Despite the pain and the loss, I felt a sense of peace knowing that I had people like Beatrice and Eleanor who truly cared about me and my children. Her support, even in her passing, gave me comfort. She kept her promise to me and stood by my side until the very end. A few days later, Ethan called. I had a feeling I knew what he was going to say, but I chose to listen. "What did you do?" he asked, his tone sharp. "What do you mean?" I responded. "You know exactly what I mean, Ava. Be more clear. What are you talking about? Why weren't you home that day? I specifically asked you to be there. I sent you a letter asking you to act like everything was normal while my mom visited." "Oh, was that what the letter said?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "You didn't read it? Number, I burned it." "You betrayed me," he yelled. "My mom was going to help me with the inheritance, but you took it all because you're selfish." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's rich. Coming from you," I replied, anger rising. "You abandoned your family and only reached out to me when it was about the inheritance. Love can't be forced, Ethan. I did what was best for me, and your mother did what was best for us. Don't ever try to contact me or the kids again. Goodbye." After that, things moved quickly. I filed for divorce and was granted full custody of the kids. Ethan tried to fight for the inheritance, but Beatrice had made it clear it was meant for me, so he lost. He and Chloe tried to pressure me into giving them some of the money, but I stood firm. Life became easier with the inheritance. I set aside a portion for the kids' college fund and invested the rest. Eleanor was able to retire, and I started working again. The kids have come to terms with the fact that their dad isn't coming back, and when they're older, I'll tell them everything.